All right, good morning.
Welcome to
Keep
another
It Humane, the
episode. I guess it
podcast.
could be afternoon
where
or
we talk
evening, but
about
welcome to
animal
another
control,
episode of Keep It
shelters,
Humane, the
and animal
podcast
welfare,
with,
and the people doing the work.
Ashley,
With your
yes,
host,
Bishop.
Ashley Bishop, what's up?
And sometimes
Not much.
Ashley
Wisconsin
Bishop.
Bishop's currently
And Daniel
at
Eggers
her local
helping people
grocery store. I'm telling you, if you only tune in every other week, you think that she never joins the podcast, but she does. The other Ashley Bishop is making sure your eggs aren't cracked when you're getting groceries this week. So she's got a busy life. She's got a real busy life.
Yo, if y'all haven't listened to the last week's podcast or whenever you listened to the podcast before, you need to go listen to it. We had a lot of fun.
You did, and it was a really good episode. Thank you for filling in for me. I was out and about, and I guess I was on the side of the road helping motorcyclists. You're
Dude.
ridiculous.
I came up with that on the spot. We didn't even think about it ahead of time. And I was just like, you know what random ass thing is Dan doing today? And I was like, you know what? He's on his bike somewhere. So it
That's
fits.
true. Yeah, that was very, very true. I was doing that. So, how you been?
Good, man. Again, I'm always on here bitching and complaining about the weather. Yesterday, it was like a freaking hurricane in Texas.
Oh, what?
Freaking rain was coming in sideways. And I don't know what it is, but I'm over it. And now it's 50 degrees. What's happening? I don't understand. But I'm good. I'm good. Last week was really short and we got a lot of things done. I feel like it's the season of getting sick. So it's like one by one, all our staff is just getting hit. So, shouts out to all my team that's out right now sick because it's been hitting everybody. It'll hit me probably last. Me and my lead care tech, we always joke, we try to stay away from each other because if I'm sick, she'll get sick. If she's sick, I get sick. We're just trying to get through all of that, but I'm excited for a week to come up. A lot of exciting things coming up for my facility and the new facility coming up, and I'm going to be busy with that, and so I'm excited. How about you?
Just enjoying life. Had a couple trips the last few weeks, which was incredible, and looking forward. I'm coming to your state in a few days. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I get to go home. When I say home, Pittsburgh. Really excited. I haven't been there since 2018. I'm gonna miss Animal Welfare Expo, but I'm sure that's gonna be a crazy great time. And the city's getting ready for the NFL draft, so there's gonna be a lot of crazy construction around there. So be careful if you're going to visit that. And I do also want to thank and shout out. I guess because this will air no the week before Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week, and we had an astounding number of people kind of sign up to be part of this participation. So last year, I intentionally put out like hey, if maybe you're a small agency and you don't have anybody to share Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week, or you're a large agency and just want to share with more than just your team, I kind of put out I don't know, what would you say, a organized, kind of like a blind.
Organized white elephant.
Yeah, pretty much for Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week. And then this year, I got, I was really busy doing some other things, and I kind of got voluntold that I was doing it again from just somebody on social media, which was great. I'm actually glad that they did that. And what they did is they shared an old post from 2025. And I kind of felt like, well, I'm not going to shut this down. We'll do it again. And so we had quite a few people that are doing it this year. So shout out to all the people that are picking up, just random gifts or swag from their department to share with, agencies across the country. I think that's super cool that we have, the passionate folks that want to do that stuff. So happy early Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week.
Yeah, I think we just met with our neighboring agencies a few days ago because we're moving over to a new CAD system, and she came by and we checked it out. So hopefully we get to set up lunch again with them. We do it every year and hang out with our other agencies because we're such a small knit county, but there's 3 agencies that do animal control.
Totally.
So yeah, we all work together really well. So we're gonna hang out and have lunch on one of the days, and then I'm planning to do a few things for our staff, and I'm excited.
And I think it could have been Wisconsin Bishop, but last week you guys talked a little bit about like just reach out to your neighboring community. I thought that was really cool. So,
No, yeah, absolutely.
are you ready? This is gonna be a fun
I'm ready.
episode. I'm excited. I've been thinking
Yeah.
about this one for a while. Let's introduce Audrey Lodato from Best Friends Animal Society, Senior Director of Regional Programs, and also the founder of the blog, the Barking at the Knot animal history blog, which is really, really cool. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you. And just, I guess, let our listeners know kind of your background, how you got started in animal welfare, and maybe just a little overview of the blog and your role at Best Friends.
Yeah, so I've been in animal welfare space honestly since I was a teenager. I started volunteering very, very young, and then just kind of moved through professionally. I've worked in a rescue organization. I've worked in a contracted agency. I worked at Brother Wolf in Asheville for a long time, which a lot of folks know about because they lost their building in Helene. And now I'm the senior director of regional programs with Best Friends. And then I also have Barking at the Knot, which is an animal welfare history blog. And that blog really is about exploring the origins of animal welfare policies and sort of the background in why we do some of the things that we do.
And that's how I think you and I connected is I've always, I shouldn't say always, but I've had a affinity, I think is the right word, for the history of our profession. And it really started, Bishop, I don't know if you were on the program when we interviewed the author of the book. It was the first Henry Berg book that I read, which,
Mm-mm.
um, my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. It's not Monsters and Miracles, it's the other one.
A traitor
Um,
to his species,
Thank you. Yes,
probably.
A Traitor to His Species, which is an outstanding, outstanding book. It's very long. So, it's kind of reads more like a history book, but it was an amazing book. And yeah, I kind of fell in love with the idea or thought that like, wow, there's all this history, which truly, Audrey, is not that old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What got you started with the history? Like what inspired
Well,
that?
I've always loved domestic history, and I've always really loved history around the time period that the Humane movement started, right? So it was kind of a like natural junction of the two. And then as I started working and progressing in my career in animal welfare, I got really interested in why we were intaking animals the way that we were,
Mhm.
especially when there are so many other solutions available, and why we kind of commonly defaulted to intake as our first solution and didn't sort of explore equally all of the things that were on the table. And that really is what sparked me to go deeper and sort of learn about the fundamental policies.
I think it's interesting in our field, and Dan and I had this conversation because he's working on a project, how none of us, at least I didn't, and I've been doing this almost 20 years. None of us really think about the history of animal control, at least on that end. I know a lot of people do know about, animal sheltering and kind of the history of that. But as far as animal control, the first thing everybody thinks of is rabies. I
Mhm.
will say this last week, everybody thought it was everybody and their mom was like, this possum has rabies in my backyard. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. So, it's that hysteria that still has kind of, over the years is still something that people are worried about, when in reality, that has been debunked a long time ago.
Hmm. It's so interesting how that sensationalism started, right?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of societal context around it, right? In that time period, we had the steam printing press come to be, right? And nobody likes a sensational story more than folks in Victorian America in particular, right? And so seeing these hydrophobia stories and then the cures for hydrophobia in newspapers really led people to believe that rabies was much more prominent than it actually was. And it really amplified the way that we went to our municipalities and sort of demanded animal control that was all animals, right? Please take in all strays as opposed to some strays.
It's a good point.
When we were kind of talking about the intake processes, um, do you think a lot of that was motivated by rabies or hydrophobia at the time that they had to, I mean, I guess, well, we haven't got into it yet, but the 1811 war against dogs, right? That was a whole movement on basically a bounty for dogs.
Hmm.
Was that
Yeah,
motivated by rabies?
yeah, I mean, I think it was motivated by sort of a confluence of things, right? When you look at people that were aggregating towards cities, especially in the United States, right? There were things that really drove people to be much more densely populated together, and then also for more people to be in proximity to animals, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I've read about that I really think is interesting is the way that tenement housing influenced it, because,
Mm.
in tenement housing, very crowded. And again, primarily Christian society, right? People had a lot of children, so they would
Hmm.
send their children outside in the summertime. Like, mom says, get out of the house. I need to do my housework. And we all know, right, that the confluence of like children and stray dogs often can lead to bites, right? And so that is one of the main things that really drove dog days and dog day bounties was that.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's another book out there. I'm going to say it wrong because it's a hard title for me. It's Dogopolis, like Metropolis, I guess.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
Dogopolis. Yep.
see. I told you I'd mess it up. Dogopolis, Dogopolis. I don't know. But reading that book, reading the book, at least I can read the words in the book. Um, I think the author talked about heat being a cause of rabies and not
Oh
necessarily,
Lord.
yeah, like not understanding how rabies actually works. So there was like a understanding on that aspect of rabies itself. And so now people, again, word of mouth back then, because there wasn't social media, and I guess I mean there was probably some print maybe, but the idea or the thought when it got warmer weather, rabies became more prevalent.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting because we really didn't have a vaccine until, 1890 in Paris, right? And so people knew that dogs carried rabies or that, if they got bitten by a dog, they would develop hydrophobia. They
Hmm.
knew that, but they didn't know why dogs got rabies in the first place. And so it led to things like thinking dogs got rabies if they were too cold, too
Hmm.
hot, too dirty. There's
Unloved, right? Wasn't that what?
Unloved.
Yes, yes,
Yes, that is
yes,
one. My
yes.
favorite is the Italian doctor who thought they were sexually frustrated and opened a dog brothel. I can't remember his name, but that one is notable.
That's a new one. I didn't know that one. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And
I'm
that's
curious.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just making just
Yeah, I'm curious on because I'm an epidemiologist, so I'm curious on, what it was like in the 1800s that kind of led to this mass hysteria that's like this, um, to the point where people are just like, for lack of better terms, sensationalizing everything that's going on. And what were the actual facts behind all of this as far as the scientists that were looking at this? It's now something that I got to go look at.
Yeah, it is really interesting. They were this very much was at a time, you mentioned 1811, right? That basically is also sort of in alignment with the development of like what we consider modern medicine and that transition from like, oh, it's the humors and the sauces in the body and we need to bleed people
mm,
into really understanding, how the body actually works and what things actually affect the body. And so animals played a big role in that, along with vivisection, which is a
mm,
whole other topic. Um, but it is really interesting to understand how those two things came along together. I mean, rabies was, right? There was no prophylactic vaccine, no,
Hmm.
if you got bitten, you didn't know if you were going to die, has a
Hmm.
very long incubation period, and it was a terrible death. And so it makes sense that people would have been horrified by the thought of dying from rabies and would have did everything in their power to want to prevent that.
certainly. And it's it's an interesting, I guess, the transition to now. So as I mentioned, it's
Hmm.
not that long ago if you look at it on like the,
Oh,
I guess that
Timeline.
timeline.
yeah.
Yeah. So like, how does it, not how, but does it still influence how we operate as animal welfare current date?
I mean, I feel like nothing influences us more. When I look at, and I mentioned before, sort of intake as our default solution, the way that we kind of came through our process of like, bounties for stray dogs and citizen policing to
Hmm.
sort of, dog brokers to then hiring those folks as municipal dog catchers to, the humane movement, the progression of all of these things, it led to funding being based on intake, animal control officers, unfortunately, at the beginning being paid based on the number of animals that they brought in. And it led to a system where intake is the first thing we think of as a
Hmm.
field. And we've broken out of that in the sense that we've identified other solutions and we've started to think about things differently, but it's always sort of intakes over here and then everything else is, intakes on the left and every other solution is on the right. We don't think about, is intake one solution of many a lot of the times.
And I can remember, I mean, it's really not that long ago when I started my first municipality job, I guess my second, because my first was like a seasonal job. Um, I can remember we, under no circumstances, Audrey, under no circumstances, Ashley, could we RTO a dog in the field. Under no
Right.
circumstances. And this is 15 years ago.
Right.
They had to come to the shelter to get the dog, period. And I was kind of dumbfounded by that because I came in with some experience from other agencies, and I'm thinking to myself, like why do we even have microchip scanners if we can't, like what's the purpose of, like, in the field if we're not going to be able to RTO a dog? And that obviously that changed within a few, probably a year or two, we were able to RTO in the field. And I think there is some, I don't know, maybe fee collection that goes along with it, or just honest. I mean, in my opinion, I think it's effort, truly. Like
Mhm.
I can't tell you the number of times where I've gone down the rabbit hole after getting a microchip that's either registered to the old owner or unregistered, but I still find a way to find its home,
Mm.
because I think that that was ultimately the best outcome for everybody involved, not just the animal, but the workers at the shelter, us as the officer, etc.
I think it's a lot of things because I think about it too, so Audrey, I'm originally from Deep South Texas. Brownsville is my hometown. So I grew up and my first job was at one of the largest facilities down there, and then I moved over to Edinburgh Shelter, and all that stuff, and that's how I got my introduction into animal welfare. And yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was, at the municipality I was at before is, well, they need to come in and they need to pay those impoundment fees. Like
Right.
if there was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was no waiving of adoption fees. There was no waiving of, any kind of impoundment fee or whatever the case might be. And I've done a complete 360 at the agency I'm at right now, which is also a municipality where I have free reign as a supervisor slash director of all of that. If somebody comes in and our goal is to, dog's been there for 10 days, we charge $15 a day on top of the impoundment fee, on top of the microchip fee. At that point, we're just like, you know what? If you have the $10 to pay for that microchip at the end of the day, that's going to help us out. So let's go ahead and get your dog microchip. We'll get it registered and send them on their way. And even if they don't, at the end of the day, it's going to help us if that animal has a microchip. Here you go. Next time it happens, maybe there'll be an impoundment fee. But I'm very lucky in that sense that our municipality gives me that leeway and understands that we are not a money making department. And I feel like a lot of municipalities, whether they're city or government or county, they still haven't lost that mindset. And I think it makes it very difficult for them to kind of move forward in this industry to get more animals home rather than not.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you think about it, there's still places that legislate, right? That if you touch an animal out in the field, that animal has to be impounded. There are whole states that legislate that.
Mm.
And so it does make it hard to progress. And when you look at, the origin of dog licensing, it really was simply to prove ownership. It had very little to do with rabies. It was really so that you could prove that your dog was owned so that the early dog brokers wouldn't take your dog. I mean, that's how it started.
Mm.
One of the things I think is interesting is that those licensing laws, the original ones, came up with other laws. And just kind of going back to, not knowing why dogs caught rabies, or got rabies, had rabies, however you want to phrase it.
Mhm.
One of the ones was a mandatory muzzle law. And a lot of places that was revoked because they thought the dog would get upset and get rabies if it
Mm.
had to wear the muzzle. So it just kind of goes to show you how antiquated these policies really were and the logic that they're rooted in and how it doesn't serve us now.
And don't you think, even though we're in an age where technology is extremely available to all of us and we have like history to prove and science to prove, but don't you think some of the things that we do may still be looked at in 20, 30, 40 years of like, why did they do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always think about what I wish for our kind of, generation, if you will, of animal welfare workers, right?
Hmm.
And what will people look back and think of us? And I really hope that we end up being the group of people that stops this intake as a first resort. But we are going to be remembered like, why in the world? Why did they have these laws
What do
and these
you, I,
policies?
I guess as we switch gears a little bit, what do you think, like, what does it look like to you as far as intake? What would be the happy median for
Hmm.
intake?
I mean,
Mm.
obviously, we have animals that need to enter our shelter system, right? That also is intrinsic and part of, our field and who we are. I would love to see people apply solutions equally, for whatever is in the best interest of that animal and that animal's and the people, right? The circumstances surrounding the situation. And to not sort of default to the animal comes in and then we solution for it, right? Because at that point, the animal and is just absorbing resources that could be better applied to other solutions. And so I think it's really retraining ourselves to think, okay, well, here's the situation, and let's think strategically about what's going to be the best outcome here and what our goals are.
Mm.
I think that's a great approach, and uh, I'll speak for the voice of. Let me preface this. Let me set this up. When I started in this industry, I can remember working alongside of some dog catchers. I'll just say that. I'm not trying to say that to like down, what's the word I want to use here? To insult. I'm truly not. Like a dog catcher was a thing and still is. There
Mhm.
are dog catchers out there. And I remember some of those dog catchers were very opinionated about who should own dogs. For example, a houseless person, like that person, oh, they can't afford vet care, they shouldn't have a dog, right? That's a very opinionated take. And I don't agree with that. Like, I feel that everyone has the right to own an animal, unless like you're truly an abusive person and like really put an animal in harm's way. But just because you can't afford a certain procedure for your dog doesn't, in my opinion, rise to the level of you shouldn't have that animal. Like there should be other means for that person. And so, where was I going with this? There was a point to this. This is what happens early Sunday mornings when I record. Um, no, there was. It like tying that to that attitude and that mindset of like you shouldn't have an animal. Also, like that person, we shouldn't, or we should impound everything. Like there shouldn't be any change is the point that I was trying to get at. And so I don't know, Ashley, if you have any thoughts on this, but like how do we get to those people to kind of change the overall temperature of our profession of animal control, of animal shelter world?
I think for me, especially being in the South, um, there's a huge difference of when I started back in 2009 to where we're at now. I will say, and I've said this before on the podcast, that before the pandemic hit, I feel like we were moving in a direction where things were getting better.
Mm.
And that's for a lot of things. It's not just one specific thing. I feel since after the pandemic, I think we've taken a few steps back. And I think my biggest issue in animal welfare right now is we're not finding the happy medium in holding people responsible. I think that is my biggest problem that I see right now is that, there's not a medium in us being able to. I understand that there's people out there that need the help, but it's come from what I've seen, it's come to a point where it's like everybody's needing that help and nobody's really taking responsibility. And I feel that's why we have gotten to the place that we are, where intakes are at all-time high because we are not holding people responsible.
I
Yeah.
get, yeah, I was gonna ask like, what does that look like for you when you say like holding people like, I guess dive into that a little bit.
Holding people responsible in a sense that it's a very big decision to take on a life. I mean, it's not just something that you can throw away. And I think a lot of what we're seeing, and I'm not going to speak for every agency out there, but what I am seeing is the typical, well, I don't have time for it, which means to me, in a lot of aspects, and I'm not saying for everybody, I'm not trying to put everybody in this one box because I know, I mean, we deal with it every day, but it's people are not wanting to put in the time and work, and when it gets too hard, then it's like that animal becomes disposable, and here we are at the shelter with a dog that has, no manners, has no socialization, doesn't do well with other animals, doesn't do well with males because it was in an all-female house. I mean, we were seeing a lot of those problems because people are not putting in the work. And for us as my agency, and I can only speak for my agency, we put a lot of time and effort into ensuring that the people understand what they're taking on, and in a sense of education, because we are in a college town and we have a lot of kids that are just out on their own. So we have to take that into perspective in our facility itself, because all these kids come in and they're like, oh well, I want my first dog and all that stuff. Well, okay, are you ready to tackle on when this dog possibly gets sick, or this dog gets out and it gets hit by a car? This dog in particular doesn't do really well with other animals. Are you prepared to make sure that you not only give this dog what it needs, but also ensure that the public and everything else is safe as well? So I think in that aspect, we can do better in ensuring that people are well educated and well rounded on what it means to take a pet. Absolutely. But at the same time, I feel like we've gotten to a point where we are trying to do that and it's not going anywhere, and people are still treating animals as trash.
I like where you're going with that.
And I just feel like we haven't had that happy medium yet, where it's like we're doing our best to help everybody that we possibly can, because we understand, we're trying to grow in this industry. But at the same time, I feel like we've lost a lot of responsibility that needs to be handed over to people who are wanting to take on a dog or cat or whatever kind of companion animal.
One thing I think that's really interesting about that is that humane education is something that's been a little bit deprioritized as the
Hmm.
movement has kind of gone on in the last 20 years, right? It used to be such a core tenet of the humane movement was, educating folks about, appropriate animal care. And we've seen that kind of go away in the last little bit. And I do personally feel like that is having an impact on the way that people are caring for animals now. You can just see the shift. And kind of Ashley, to your point, balancing it is
Hmm.
tricky because we know that if we refuse an adoption, those folks will likely just acquire an animal from another source, likely, an unaltered animal that's not vaccinated. They'll be mad at the shelter. So if something happens, maybe they don't, ask the shelter for help. So it is a very tricky situation, and just finding the sweet spot of how to help people understand and what humane care is something that's really difficult right now.
And I,
Absolutely. And
yeah, no, you're
go ahead,
fine.
Dan.
Go. No, I was gonna say,
Yeah, I'm
no,
fine.
you're already in.
No, no, yeah. Like I just feel like again, with a lot of what we've seen in the last 5 years, is finding that balance, and I think that's where it makes it difficult for everybody, whether you're a municipality or a contracted facility or a rescue organization, is really having that balance, because we all hear it. Well, that rescue's charging $400 or $500 for this animal that they took in, while I can go get a backyard doodle for $50, when they don't realize that that rescue probably took on this dog. It needed some kind of plate because it got hit by a car and needed an FHO or whatever the case might be. There's just not a lot of understanding in all of that, and I feel like we could do a better job in not only educating on why we do what we do, but also what it means to be a pet parent for the longevity of that pet's life.
Hmm.
And I was gonna just jump in about like, and that's what it's kind of always been about for us is we're we're trying to be more proactive in today's world, but we've been a reactive program from a shelter side or an animal control side to human problems. And that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of always been our role. And
Mm-hmm.
so, whether it's programs like Best Friends, ASPCA, Humane World, um, Pet Finder, I think I'm wearing their shirt today, like uh, Pet Hub, all those places, like trying to make it more of a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what I guess I think best friends they do some things like when a proactive wise like put stakes in yards when a dog's found in a neighborhood. Can you talk about any other programs like that, Audrey?
Yeah, I mean, we just did a like a yard sign program that I think is really cool with Petco Love Lost.
Okay.
Just kind of
Mm-hmm.
promoting that platform. So that's a recent one. And of course, we always advocate for the community to work toward solving those issues amongst themselves, right, as much as possible. So yeah, those are some things that Best Friends does.
Is there any metrics yet that like show how well that program works? I was talking to a friend of mine in Texas that also does it, and they haven't yet put together any metrics. So I was just wondering if you have.
I'm sure they are. There are. I don't know them off the top of my head. Yeah. But I
Okay.
mean, when you think about it, right, surely those things are effective because we know that most stray dogs are found like right within a mile of their home, right? So
Yeah, most
obviously
of
it
them.
makes a
Yeah.
heck of a lot more sense to get that animal out to the community first and have the folks who found the dog, hang on to that dog for a hot minute and see if they can find the owner rather than driving the dog across town to enter the shelter system.
And if you think about it too, like shelters aren't placed in central locations in cities.
We all know shelters don't get put in the best areas. It's just kind of the nature of the game, and a lot of us are very run down and been in old facilities for, God knows how long.
Sure.
Um, but I think it's been interesting to see how well the community has been engaged, at least in my area of, like, hey, I found this dog. I'm gonna go knock on a couple of doors, but if anybody happens to know the owner, shoot me a private message. So I think it's been great, and I've been trying to, think on it. And I don't know if Best Friends has put anything out like this. Like, what can we do to encourage that, but not only reward those people, like even if it was like a I don't know, like a little trophy or like a little certificate or something like I said, like, hey, I'm like a proactive pet reuniter or something like that.
I have heard of one shelter who does a t-shirt for if somebody
Oh,
finds a pet and will, foster it in their neighborhood while the
uh-huh.
home is being looked for. So I thought that was a really cute idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
And I think it's conversations like this, obviously, maybe in other settings that help push the needle forward. You talked about education, and if you look at, and I don't know, I'm sure you know about it. I'm not sure if any of your blogs go into the George Thorndike Angel stuff, where he had the Our Dumb Animals magazine that was heavily produced back in I guess, or it started late 1800s, early 1900s, where that, really focused on humane education. That was their social media, if you
Hmm.
will, back in the day. And then there was another, you can get some of these on eBay too. There was another one called, I think it was Our Band of Brothers. No, Our Band of Mercy. Our Band of
Band of
Mercy.
Mercy. Bands
Band
of
of Mercy.
Mercy.
That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And that also talked a little bit about just some humane things as well. And so I don't know, you had a lot of like push even then. Like if you look at like I don't know, like just the forming of animal shelters and the need, like there were people then like even like the dog catcher back in the 1800s, like you think that it would have been like widely accepted. There were people stopping that, I guess it would be a horse and carriage, and like letting the dogs out of the back. Like they didn't want them to go to the dog pound because that's
Mhm.
obviously what it was called back then. Like they didn't agree with that way of, I guess, handling the animals 200 years ago. And here we are, still kind of operating in some ways similarly to that. And so you know, it's it's just an interesting reflection, and that's why I'm so big on the history of our profession, because as you kind of said, like that's the foundation for everything. Like if you don't know where you're from, then how do you know where you're going?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting about how the humane movement kind of ended up getting involved in sheltering, right? Because the humane movement itself really didn't have much to do with kind of the dog and cat set at the beginning,
Hmm.
right? It was about cruelism and the way that society, the influence of cruelty to animals, how that would impact society. And there wasn't this great desire, right, to get involved in sort of the stray dog situation. In most instances, these shelters were kind of forced into being as like almost a byproduct of this larger movement. Um, and then in that they were, making the animal sheltering system more humane, but the way that that happened was to make the killing more humane, right? And a lot of the ways that that happened was to kind of take it out of public visibility.
Hmm.
So, we talked about particularly like in New York City, the when it was a municipal dog catching situation, they would round up the dogs and then they would be drowned in the East River, and kind of everybody's
Yes,
heard that story, right?
yes,
And that
yes,
was very visible, right?
yes.
And so the rise up about that was, we don't want to see this. This isn't something that we should be exposed to because the foundations of the humane movement were that the cruelty of that would influence the way that people perceived, right, their lives, other people. If you harm your horse, you're more likely to harm your wife, that sort of, you know, ideology.
Sure.
And so then when we went and formed animal shelters, a lot of that was we're going to kill the animals humanely. And that's, at that time, sure, but it's another example of the way that our ideologies now were framed, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess at this point in time, Audrey, what do you feel is missing when somebody doesn't understand what the job is of, let's say, a municipal shelter or humane society? Because again, I am known as the big, kill shelter and whatnot in our town and area, and we're very honest with our public. We are very, very honest about what it is we can do, what it is we can't do. We do our best. We let them know, part of our rhetoric is we will try our best to do what we can. But I feel like here, at least in the last 10 years or so, I think we've lost a little bit on what it is we actually can do in the circumstances that we're in right now. How do we
Sure.
change that rhetoric, and how do we get people to understand that, Mr. Golden Retriever over here who is absolutely love bug, but will absolutely go after and kill another dog. There's
Hmm.
not an adopter for those dogs everywhere.
Hmm.
What do we do in those situations where people are not understanding that we have to make those tough decisions when nobody is coming up to meet that animal's needs, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And it's a complex question. I
Yeah.
think I think the shelters that I've seen sort of handle these things the best are the ones that are just sort of radically transparent, right?
Mhm.
There's everything is transparent, and this is what it is we're trying to do with our community, and this is what, the data looks like, and this is, the help that we need, and this is how you can help us, and just really opening those doors because for all of this time, transparency has been something that we as a field have intentionally avoided, right?
Yeah.
We had that foundation of like taking killing out of the public eye, and then it became we're not going to talk about it. We're
Hmm.
not going to talk about it. And so by not talking about it, what happens is that the community can't help. And there's a lot of trauma, right, for animal services workers for when they have been transparent and the things that have happened to kind of force transparency. And nobody wants to be, what did you say? We're the big bad kill shelter.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to be personally viewed that way or have it feel like it's a personal attack, right? But we can't move the needle unless we say, hey, this is what's going on inside of our
Correct.
doors, right? And so
Absolutely.
it's sticky and we have to be really brave to kind of
Hmm.
do those things. And that to me is part of what I hope our generation of animal services folks will be able to accomplish is that radical transparency and that radical candor, if you will, about what's going on.
Yeah, and I think since I took over the facility, I think a lot of our community does appreciate it. They come in and they're like, "Well, thank you. I didn't know that, this happens and it's unfortunate." And when they call and something, unfortunately goes wrong or whatever, we're very transparent. We're not going to say, "Oh, well, we don't know or we can't find." No, unfortunately, this animal is euthanized because of XYZ,
Hmm.
and sometimes it slaps people in the face and sometimes it doesn't. But again, we pride ourselves on being absolutely transparent, especially as a municipality, because again, we owe it to our taxpayers about what's going on and what are we doing to help not only solve the problem but also ensure that our community is kept safe.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
that
The one thing,
transparent, sorry,
oh, go ahead.
I mean, that transparency is so imperative, not just to the community, but to staff as well. And
Hmm.
we have a lot of animal shelters that they don't want to be transparent. Like they feel like they have something to hide. And I don't understand why that is. I really don't.
I agree with that. The best advice I ever got in all of my animal services career is people want to help, but you have to ask them.
Mm,
Mm, mm, hmm.
yeah.
Even if it's scary, because
Hmm.
again, we've changed a lot. We're a very small town, and there's a history there before I got there and whatnot. So again, it's all about transparency. Even if it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, it's important to have it because if the community doesn't understand what's going on or what we're trying to do, then, and the reality is it's not going to get anywhere if they're not going to be able to help. For us, it's those programs too. We do free spay and neuters for all of our residents, regardless of your stature in the community. A fixed pet is a better pet, in my opinion. Just because somebody lives over here in the country club doesn't mean that their animal can't get loose and get pregnant. It's just the reality of things. So we want to ensure that those programs are in for all of our residents because, again, at the end of the day, while I hate this saying, they do pay our salary. But it's something that we can absolutely provide to also help what we're trying to get in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just is so, so important. And talking about, what the purpose is for the shelter and what it is that you hope the shelter will be and what it is that you would like to accomplish, right? All of those things are very important. We have a long history of path dependency, right? In animal
Yeah.
welfare, we love
Yeah.
to do things the way we've always done it. And so,
Yeah.
Mm.
as a leader, for me, it was always, I'm going to set the vision of what I would like my animal shelter and my community to look like. And here's what that is. And then I'm going to talk about that and where we are between that goal and where we are now.
Mm.
Hmm. Hmm.
What? Oh, so actually, before we go on to what you're working on next, I found some riveting things in our profession in this country that I had no idea up until like the last few weeks that existed. So there was before the dog and cat world of strays, I would even say dogs, in the 1600s, we're talking about like colonial America, the Massachusetts states. There was before the dog catcher, before the dog whipper, before the dog collector, there was a hog reeve. So the hog reeve, yes, the hog reeve was essentially your first dog catcher and or pound master, where they would have a pound built for stray livestock. So long before the dog and cat world, this is literally like the 1630s, that they had this whole, I guess, profession. I don't even know if you'd call it a profession, but somebody established for the whole livestock issue that this country faced back then. So it's just kind of neat to know that, to me, it always started with the dog whipper in Europe in the, 17th, 18th centuries, I think, or 16th to 19th century, somewhere in there. Um, that's where I was like, oh, that's where our profession started. And then I did some more digging and found out about the hog reeve. And I just try to like imagine a time where like they're wearing like would they wear overalls back then? Were overalls even invented, or were they wearing like pioneer pants with the boots? Like I don't know what they're wearing, but just
Pioneer pants, is that?
they got they got pioneer pants. Get those. I'm pretty sure you can get them at Lululemon right now. So anyway,
Oh.
but it's just crazy to think about like how deep it truly goes. How deep do you want to dig? So what are you working on now, like with the blog? And then I'd love to hear kind of some programs and things you're working on with best friends as we move
Mhm.
forward 2026 and beyond.
Oh, with the blog, it's just, like the weekly post. I'm thinking about doing a couple virtual events. I think that might be fun. So maybe in the near future. I mean, my blog's really just the place where I can put my research so that my husband doesn't get bored with me talking about rabies,
That's
And,
awesome.
at Best Friends, we're just continuing doing the good work of like helping animal shelters, optimize their programming, help them figure out how to get more animals out alive every day. That's what my team does, and I'm so lucky to do that.
That's awesome.
Is
Really
there
cool.
any like big programming coming up that that you can talk about or anything that you've seen here in the last, I mean, we're only 4 months in really into the new year. Are there any, statistics that you're seeing that you guys are trying to work on?
Well, I can tell you that our next national conference is coming up. It's going to be
Mhm.
May 7th through the 9th in Salt Lake.
Mhm.
It's going to be so much fun. Obviously, Best Friends was founded in Utah. We're based in Utah, so we're really excited to be having our conference in Utah this year. That will be exciting. And we've got lots of new data and information that will be coming out there about, how states around the country are doing and what folks can do to help and all of that good stuff. So
Are you gonna, is it close to the Kanab? Like, are people gonna be able to go tour the sanctuary when they're
oh,
there?
I
Or-
wish. That would be so amazing. Salt Lake's about 3 hours from Kanab,
Oh,
so
Mm.
but
that's not bad.
people could take the road trip, right? It's a beautiful drive to go
Yeah.
between the two.
Yeah. Really cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, It
Mhm.
leads us to our favorite part of the, or at least my favorite part of the show, where we put you into, because look, it's 2026. If you're not using AI, you're still riding around with your horse and carriage. Like it's time to jump into that. So we put you in there and we say, who is Audrey Lodato? You're an experienced animal welfare professional and leader in the sheltering field. Here's a clear I can't even talk, snapshot of who she is. Current role. We already know who you are, but we'll still do this. Current role, Regional Programs Director, East and Pacific Regions at Best Friends Animal Society. Focus helps animal shelters improve operations, build programs, and increase life-saving outcomes through strategy, training, and collaboration. Experience 15 to 20 years in animal welfare leadership roles. Former executive director at Pets Alive Animal Sanctuary, previous director of animal care at Brother Wolf Animal Rescue, where she worked on spay neuter programs, disaster response, and shelter support. And then reputation in the field, known for being what she jokingly calls a shelter nerd with a passion for improving systems and mentoring others. Strong advocate for keeping pets with families and advancing humane, effective shelter practices. And then other work writes and researches the history of animal services through her blog, Barking at the Knot, exploring how past practices shape modern animal control and sheltering. Go to that website if you haven't looked it up yet, barkingatthenot.com. That's not ChatGPT, that's my own edition there. Barkingatthenot.com. That's KNOT because I'm stupid and would probably just put NOT. How accurate was AI's representation of you?
Oh, I'm flattered by AI's representation of me. That's very nice. Thank you,
It's
AI.
it's it's pretty scary. It's pretty
It
scary.
is. It's so scary. We did this, what, like at the beginning of the year for all of us, and I was just like, yikes.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Do you use it in any form for your current day to day? Do you use it for your blog stuff? Like how much are you using AI?
Well, I'll tell you about an experience that I had. Last week, I was at a pathway planning session for in New Jersey, right? And so they were basically it was folks from our vet med team, and they were talking about how to operationalize pathway planning, right, to reduce length of stay. So an
Sure.
excellent workshop. And we were sort of manually going through the history of some of the animals in the shelter's system, right? And sort of laying out their journey and then manually finding places where you could shorten that length of stay by, just refining a practice that was at hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just cannot wait until AI can do this for us. Imagine the reduction in length of stay when AI can take over pathway planning. I mean, it's just mind blowing, right?
Mm,
So,
You would think that it's already there. We just have to tell it how to do it.
exactly.
Um, and what to look for. I mean, I think we have to just the main thing, and I was just teaching this in I did an AI class in Nevada for Arizona Animal Control Officers Association, and one of the things that like you can't allow it to make the decision, but you can have it like at least show like patterns and how to like really identify who's here, why they're here, how long they've been here, and then you as as the decision maker, then you can kind of help speed things along after you get the I guess the administrative piece out of the way. But people
Mhm.
are so, do you find like, and maybe you don't, but maybe it's different in the private world, but like, do you find people are afraid of it, are reluctant, like don't want to use it, don't feel like it belongs? Like, what is your take on it?
I think for a lot of folks, it's still also new that people are just kind
mhm,
of feeling it out. And I don't really, they don't really understand sort of what it can do for them and how to use it. I mean, we all know folks are using it to kind of write adoption profiles and
Mhm.
make cute pictures, but we also are learning, right, about the boundless capabilities that AI has and all of the abilities to help us. And for me, I don't know. I'm just really excited to see how we're able to embrace it moving forward and all the
Absolutely.
great things that it can do to save lives.
I had two guys, I was actually, it was after class and I was kind of just, mingling with the group, and two guys came up to me and they said, you know what? They were kind of embarrassed, and I'm not trying to like call them out in a bad way. They were like, we still don't even know what AI is. We thought it meant artificial insemination, and
Oh,
then
I mean, it does.
it
we're
did.
not wrong.
It used to, but then they even so then what I did after the class is because we did a really fun uh, project where I broke everybody in groups and like I had them versus AI. It was really cool. And so they still didn't understand like kind of what that meant. So after class, we sat there for probably a good 30 minutes and I was like, let's look at it. Like let's sit here together, let's put it in, let's like show you how it actually works. And I think that they're mind blown and they're from a smaller, community that's not maybe as technologically advanced as some other communities maybe.
Mhm.
And so it was neat to see their eyes kind of light up when they saw the benefits that it can provide. And I think there's an idea or a thought process, and I think this will change over time. This is just, common with any sort of change in the world that, people will become stupid or lazy because they have AI to do the work for them. That's not how it works. Like, trust me, you can put in things in AI and it come back completely false. Like, you have to make
Hmm.
sure that you're, really fact checking, making sure that it's provided. If you're, especially if you're doing things like you're doing, like providing the citing sources, like you can't just make up something because you think that's the tone that I'm
Mhm.
I'm working with. Like it really has to, dig deep and then
Mhm.
you have to confirm that everything is accurate. Otherwise, it could be pretty messy. So
Yeah, it has a wild imagination
it
sometimes.
does. Hallucinations, I talk about it all the time. Or just make things up that don't exist. I'm like, what are you talking about, AI? Well, this has been really great. I'm really grateful that you had the time
Mhm.
today to join us and talk about this history. Is there anything you want to like let our listeners know before we end the program today? I thought you covered a lot, so if
Mhm.
there's anything else that you have, we'd love to hear it.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I'm really grateful that y'all had me on, and this was a lot of fun. So thanks so much.
You're welcome, and
Thank you.
if you have anything you'd like to share or anything cool that you find historically, I know you're gonna go look up the hog reeve as soon as we're.
Immediately.
I need to know about the hog reeve. But if you have anything you'd like to share, please reach out. We're happy to get it out to our listeners.
Great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. And as we like to say, Bishop, let's continue to help people.
Help animals.
Keep it
Keep
humane.
it humane.